The metal doors of the detention cell slid open with a soft hiss. Commander Zixthara stepped inside, her massive form filling the doorway. She stood nearly 8 feet tall, her body covered in thick black chitinous plates that gleamed under the harsh white lights. Forearms extended from her torso, each ending in razor-sharp claws that could slice through steel. Her head was elongated and insect-like, with compound eyes that reflected light like broken mirrors. 2 smaller arms near her shoulders twitched constantly, testing the air with chemical sensors. This was how the Voidborn had evolved. They were the nightmare that haunted the dreams of every species in the galaxy. Their ancestors had consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing but empty husks floating in space. Even now, after millions of years of civilization, their very presence triggered ancient fears buried deep in the genetic memory of all living things. Zixthara expected the usual reaction. First would come the trembling. Then the human would press himself against the far wall, probably soiling himself in terror. Some species fainted immediately. Others screamed until their voices gave out. A few went completely insane, their minds unable to process the primal fear that her presence triggered. But the human sitting on the simple metal bench did none of these things. Captain Marcus. Chen looked up from a small datapad he was reading. His brown eyes met hers without flinching. No fear clouded his gaze. No tremor shook his hands. He simply nodded politely as if greeting a neighbor. "Good morning," Marcus said in heavily accented Galactic Standard. "I assume you're here to talk?" Zixthara paused. Her bioluminescent threat patches began to glow automatically, casting eerie blue light across the cell walls. This display had caused hardened warriors to collapse in terror. The human glanced at the lights with mild interest, then returned to his datapad. "I am Commander Zixthara of the Voidborn Empire," she announced, her voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floor. "You will answer my questions, human." "Sure," Marcus replied, setting down his datapad. "Though I should mention I only speak basic Galactic Standard. My translation software was damaged when you captured my ship, so please speak slowly." Zixthara's smaller arms twitched in confusion. The human was being polite, cooperative even. This had never happened before. She had interrogated hundreds of prisoners from dozens of species. All of them had been reduced to gibbering wrecks within moments of her arrival. She activated her pheromone glands, flooding the small cell with chemical signals that triggered fight-or-flight responses in most organic beings. The human didn't even blink. "What is your species' military strength?" Zixthara demanded, trying to regain control of the situation. "Pretty good, I suppose," Marcus answered thoughtfully. "We've had a lot of practice fighting each other. Thousands of years of it, actually, though we're working on that. How many worlds do you control?" "Just one so far, Earth. We've got some colonies and research stations, but Earth is home." Marcus tilted his head. "How about you?" "I've heard the Voidborn Empire is quite large." Zixthara's compound eyes flickered. He was asking her questions now. This wasn't how interrogations worked. She was supposed to be in control, radiating menace and terror. Instead, she felt oddly unsettled. She tried a different approach. Rising to her full height, she extended all forearms and let her natural weapons extend. Bone-white spikes emerged from her forearms. Her jaw split open to reveal 3 rows of serrated teeth. She had seen entire armies retreat at this display. Marcus watched with apparent fascination. "That's really impressive," he said. "Are those retractable?" "The bone spikes, I mean. That must be useful in daily life." "You should be afraid," Zixthara said, confusion creeping into her voice. "Why?" Marcus asked, genuinely puzzled. The simple question hit her like a physical blow. Why? Because she was Voidborn. Because her species had terrorized the galaxy for eons. Because every other living thing in the universe knew to fear them on sight. "I am a predator," she explained, as if talking to a small child. "My species hunts, we kill. We consume." "Oh, okay." Marcus nodded, understanding. "So do we, actually. Humans, I mean. We're pretty good at it, too." Zixthara stared at him. This small, soft creature with no visible weapons claimed to be a predator. It was almost insulting. "You have no claws," she pointed out. "We make tools," Marcus replied. "Much more effective than claws. No fangs. We cook our food. Makes it easier to digest, probably healthier too. No natural armor. We build shelters, and we make armor when we need it." Each answer was delivered in the same calm, matter-of-fact tone. Zixthara felt a strange sensation she had never experienced before. Her spine began to feel cold despite the warm air in the cell. "You are prey," she insisted. "Look at you. Small, weak, defenseless." Marcus considered this seriously. "I can see why you might think that. We're not very impressive physically, but appearances can be deceiving." He stood up from the bench and stretched. Even standing, he barely reached Zixthera's chest. His movements were fluid and relaxed, showing no sign of fear or tension. "May I ask you something?" Marcus said. Zixthera found herself nodding before she realized what she was doing. "What's the most dangerous animal on your homeworld?" The question caught her off guard. The void serpents. They grow to be 300 feet long. Their bite can dissolve bone." "Impressive," Marcus said approvingly. "On Earth, one of our most dangerous animals is about the size of my thumb." "Impossible. It's true. The blue-ringed octopus. Tiny thing, really. But its bite can kill an adult human in minutes. We have lots of small, dangerous creatures. Spiders, scorpions, snakes, jellyfish. Some of them live right in our houses with us." Marcus picked up his datapad and showed her the screen. Images of Earth creatures scrolled past. Zixthera's cold feeling grew stronger. "This is a great white shark," Marcus explained, showing her a picture of a massive predator with rows of teeth. "Some humans swim with these for fun." The next image showed a tiger, its orange and black stripes vivid on the screen. "This is a tiger. We used to hunt them, but now we protect them. Beautiful creatures." Then came a bear, massive and powerful. Grizzly bear. Some people keep their smaller cousins as pets. With each image, Zixthera felt her worldview shifting. These creatures were clearly apex predators, and humans lived alongside them. Some they hunted, others they protected, a few they kept as companions. "Why don't you fear me, human?" she asked quietly. Marcus looked up at her with those calm brown eyes. When he spoke, his words sent ice through her very soul. "Because you remind me of the things from home, the things we grew up with, the things we learned to live with, hunt, or befriend." He smiled, and somehow that expression was more terrifying than any threat display she could produce. "You're just like them, really. Just bigger." The detention cell suddenly felt very small. Zixthera, for the first time in her life, understood what it meant to be prey. Zixthera stared at the human for a long moment. The cold feeling in her spine spread through her entire body. She had faced down enemy fleets without feeling this strange sensation. She had stood before the Galactic Council and delivered ultimatums that sent entire species fleeing to distant stars. But this small, soft creature with his calm eyes and gentle smile made her feel something she had never experienced before. "You compare me to Earth animals?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "In a way, yes," Marcus replied, still looking at his datapad. "Though you're much more advanced, obviously. You have technology, culture, civilization, but the basic design is familiar." He scrolled through more images on his device. "Look, here's a mantis. See the similarities? The way your arms are positioned, the compound eyes, the predatory stance. On Earth, mantises are incredible hunters. They can strike faster than the human eye can follow." Zixthera looked at the image. The resemblance was unmistakable. Her people did share certain characteristics with this Earth creature. "We find them fascinating," Marcus continued. "Some people keep them as pets. Children study them in school. Scientists spend their lives watching how they hunt and live. Pets?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "Oh yes, humans love keeping other species as companions. Dogs, cats, birds, fish, reptiles, insects. We've domesticated hundreds of species over the years." Marcus swiped to show her more images. "These are some of the animals we share our homes with." The pictures showed creatures of every size and description. Some looked harmless enough, but others were clearly predators. Zixthera saw humans embracing massive dogs with powerful jaws. Children played with snakes wrapped around their arms. A woman held a large spider in her cupped hands, smiling. "We have a saying," Marcus added. "Give a human enough time and they'll try to pet anything. Even dangerous things. Especially dangerous things. The more dangerous something is, the more interesting we find it." Marcus chuckled. "We're strange that way, I suppose." Zixthera's breathing became shallow. She was beginning to understand something terrible. "What about things that hunt you? Things that see you as prey? Those are the most interesting of all," Marcus said with enthusiasm. "Take sharks, for example. They've been hunting in Earth's oceans for millions of years. Perfect predators. Some people were so fascinated by them that they dedicated their lives to studying them, swimming with them, understanding them. And they don't eat you? Sometimes they do. But that's the risk you take when you want to understand something truly magnificent. Marcus met her eyes again. Most predators aren't randomly violent, you know. They hunt when they need to eat, or when they feel threatened. Once you understand their behavior, you can usually find ways to coexist. The implications of his words hit her like a meteor strike. Zixithara had spent her entire career being the thing that others feared. She was the monster in the dark, the nightmare that made entire civilizations surrender without a fight. But to humans, she wasn't a monster at all. She was just another animal to be studied, understood, and possibly befriended. Your species has no survival instincts, she said desperately. We have excellent survival instincts, Marcus corrected. We just define survival differently than most species. We don't run from predators. We study them, learn from them, and find ways to live with them. Sometimes we hunt them. Sometimes we protect them. Sometimes we make them part of our families. He showed her another image. It was a human child, perhaps 10 years old, sitting next to an enormous wolf. The wolf's head was nearly as large as the child's torso, its teeth clearly visible as it panted. But the child was laughing, one small hand buried in the wolf's thick fur. This is what we did with wolves, Marcus explained. Thousands of years ago, they were our competitors. Both species hunted the same prey. We could have fought until one of us was extinct. Instead, we found ways to work together. Now we call them dogs, and they're our best friends. You domesticated wolves? Over many generations, yes. They helped us hunt. We shared our food with them. They protected our families. We protected theirs. Eventually, they became so much a part of human life that we can't imagine existing without them. Zixithara's 4 arms began to tremble slightly. She was starting to see a pattern in human behavior that terrified her more than any weapon. What about your enemies? She asked. Surely you have some species that you simply fight. Some creatures too dangerous to befriend. Marcus thought about this for a moment. Well, there are mosquitoes. Most people don't like mosquitoes. They spread disease and they're annoying. But even then, some scientists study them to understand how diseases spread. And some species of mosquito are actually beneficial to the ecosystem. So you find value in everything. We try to. It's how we've survived for so long. Instead of just seeing threats, we look for opportunities. Every predator might become an ally. Every dangerous situation might teach us something new. Every enemy might become a friend, given enough time and understanding. The cold in Zixithara's spine was spreading to her limbs now. She was beginning to understand what humans really were. They weren't just fearless. They were something much more dangerous than that. They were optimists. They looked at the universe and saw potential friends everywhere. They saw every nightmare creature as a possible companion. They approached every dangerous situation with curiosity instead of fear. You want to understand me? She realized aloud. Of course I do, Marcus said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. You're fascinating. An entire species evolved for perfect predation. But you've built a civilization. You have art, culture, technology. You've moved beyond simple hunting to create something beautiful. How could I not want to understand that? Zixithara backed away from him, her compound eyes wide with growing horror. You're not afraid because you think you can domesticate me. Domesticate? Marcus looked confused. No, that's not the right word. Domestication implies control, breeding for specific traits. I'm talking about friendship, partnership, finding ways we can help each other. You want to make me your pet. I want to make you my friend, Marcus corrected gently. There's a big difference. But Zixithara was no longer listening to his words. She was seeing the bigger picture, and it filled her with a terror beyond anything her species had ever known. Humans didn't conquer through fear or force. They conquered through something far more insidious and unstoppable. They conquered through kindness. They would approach every species in the galaxy with curiosity and friendship. They would find ways to help, to understand, to connect. And slowly, inevitably, every species would find themselves drawn into humanity's ever-expanding circle of companionship. The galaxy's apex predators would become their guard dogs. The most dangerous creatures would become their friends. The most feared species would find themselves looking forward to human visits, human trade, human friendship, and they would do it all with smiles and genuine kindness, never realizing they were the most terrifying force the universe had ever unleashed. After Marcus was escorted back to his cell for the night, Zixithara couldn't sleep. She sat in her private quarters aboard the detention station, staring at the humans' confiscated files on her personal screen. What she found there made the cold feeling in her spine turn to ice. The human databases were extensive and detailed. They contained information about Earth's history, biology, culture, and most disturbingly, their approach to other species. Zixthera had expected to find military records, weapon specifications, battle strategies. Instead, she found something far more unsettling. She found love stories. Humans, it seemed, had an almost supernatural ability to form emotional bonds with anything that moved. Their history was filled with accounts of people who had befriended the most unlikely creatures. There was a man who lived with grizzly bears for 13 years, treating them like family until they eventually killed him. Even then, his final journal entries spoke of love for the bears, not anger or fear. Another file told of a woman who rescued and raised orphaned lions. The lions grew to full size but continued to treat her as part of their pride. When she visited them years later at a wildlife preserve, they ran to greet her like long-lost family members. There were hundreds of such stories. Humans who swam with killer whales, people who made friends with venomous snakes, researchers who lived among wolves, gorillas, and chimpanzees until they were accepted as part of the pack. But it was the scientific data that truly frightened her. Humans, she learned, were persistence hunters. They didn't kill their prey with claws or fangs. They simply followed it, walking steadily, never stopping, never giving up, until their target collapsed from exhaustion. They had literally walked their prey to death across entire continents. The files showed ancient human migration patterns. Small groups of humans had spread across their entire planet, adapting to every environment: desert, Arctic, jungle, mountain, coastline. Humans had found ways to survive and thrive everywhere. When they encountered other species, they didn't fight them or flee from them. They studied them, learned from them, and eventually made them part of human society. The domestication records were staggering. Humans had taken wolves and turned them into hundreds of different breeds of dogs, each designed for specific purposes. Hunting dogs, guard dogs, herding dogs, lap dogs. They had domesticated cats, horses, cattle, pigs, chickens, and dozens of other species. But more disturbing were the animals they kept as companions without domesticating them. The files showed humans living with tigers, keeping venomous spiders as pets, swimming with sharks, and even attempting to befriend. Crocodile Zixthera found a video file labeled Australia. She opened it and watched in growing horror as humans casually interacted with some of the most dangerous creatures she had ever seen. Massive spiders with fangs like needles, snakes that could kill with a single bite, jellyfish so venomous that touching them meant certain death. The humans in the video weren't afraid. They were excited. They pointed at these deadly creatures with enthusiasm, explaining their hunting methods and survival strategies to others. Some even held the less dangerous ones, talking about them like proud parents showing off their children. "Beautiful, isn't she?" one human said, holding a spider the size of his hand. "Look at those markings. Absolutely stunning." Zixthera paused the video and stared at the screen. The human was smiling. He was genuinely happy to be holding a creature that could kill him in minutes. She continued reading through the files. Human psychology reports painted a picture of a species driven by curiosity above all else. When faced with something unknown, their first instinct wasn't fear or aggression. It was to investigate, to understand, to find common ground. Their exploration records showed the same pattern repeating endlessly. Humans would encounter a new environment or creature, study it carefully, then find ways to coexist with it. Sometimes this meant avoiding certain areas or species. Sometimes it meant learning to hunt them safely, but often it meant finding ways to live together peacefully. The most chilling file was labeled Domestication Theory, Future Applications. It was a scientific paper discussing the possibility of domesticating other intelligent species. The authors wrote about it casually, as if the idea of befriending and eventually domesticating aliens was perfectly natural. Given sufficient time and positive interaction, the paper concluded, humans have demonstrated the ability to form beneficial relationships with virtually any species. The key factors appear to be patience, understanding, and mutual benefit. Even traditionally aggressive or predatory species can be integrated into human society, given the proper approach. Zixthera's hands shook as she closed the file. The humans weren't just unafraid of the galaxy's predators. They were actively planning to befriend them all. She opened another file, this one containing human military records. She expected to find evidence of conquest, expansion, domination. Instead, she found something worse. Human warfare was incredibly sophisticated, but it wasn't their primary tool for expansion. When humans conquered territory, they usually did it by making the inhabitants want to be conquered. They brought trade, technology, medicine, and culture. They intermarried with local populations. They learned local languages and customs. Within a few generations, the conquered peoples often considered themselves human. They fought alongside their former enemies, shared their resources, and adopted human customs willingly. Integration through attraction. One military strategist had written, "Make them want what we have. Make them want to be part of what we're building. Force is expensive and temporary. Friendship is cheap and permanent." Zixthera stood up and began pacing her quarters. She was starting to understand the true scope of what humanity represented. They weren't just another spacefaring species looking for resources or territory. They were a force of nature. Like a slow-moving tide, they would spread across the galaxy, making friends with everyone they encountered. They would study each species, learn their needs and desires, then find ways to fulfill them. They would bring gifts, offer help, share knowledge, and slowly, inevitably, every species they encountered would find themselves drawn into humanity's vast, ever-growing family. The Voidborn Empire had conquered through fear. They ruled by making others afraid to resist. But humans would conquer through love. They would rule by making others afraid to leave. Which method, Zixthera wondered, was truly more terrifying? She thought about Marcus sitting calmly in his cell, showing her pictures of Earth's creatures with genuine enthusiasm. He wasn't plotting escape or revenge. He was trying to understand her, to find common ground, to make a connection. He was already starting to domesticate her, and she was beginning to enjoy it. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She was a Voidborn commander, one of the most feared beings in the galaxy, and after just one conversation with a human, she found herself looking forward to their next meeting. She wanted to learn more about Earth, about human culture, about Marcus himself. She was already becoming one of his pets, and the most terrifying part was that she didn't mind. Zixthera sat back down at her desk and stared at the human files. Tomorrow she would have to report to the Galactic Council about this first contact with humanity. She would have to tell them what she had learned, but how could she explain that the galaxy's newest species wasn't interested in conquest or domination? How could she make them understand that humans were far more dangerous than any traditional enemy? How could she tell them that humanity's greatest weapon was a smile? The next morning brought visitors to Kepler Station. Word of the captured human had spread through the Galactic Council, and representatives from several major species had arrived to observe this first contact situation. Zixthera watched them gather in the observation room adjacent to Marcus's cell, each delegation maintaining careful distance from the others. The crystalline hegemony had sent 3 of their silicon-based representatives, their bodies glowing with internal light as they communicated in harmonic frequencies. The Aquatic Federation floated in mobile water tanks, their tentacled forms undulating gracefully. The Hive Collective's insectoid scouts clicked and chittered among themselves, while the energy beings flickered between visible and invisible states. All of them had one thing in common. They gave Zixthera a wide berth. Even veteran diplomats and hardened military officers couldn't completely suppress their species' instinctive fear of the Voidborn. She had grown accustomed to this reaction over the years, even found it useful in negotiations. But watching Marcus through the observation window, she felt that familiar cold sensation returning. He sat peacefully on his bench, apparently meditating with his eyes closed. When the cell door opened and she entered, he opened his eyes and smiled. "Good morning, Commander Zixthera. Did you sleep well?" The question was so normal, so genuinely concerned, that several of the observers made startled noises. Through the window, she could see them leaning forward, trying to understand how any being could speak so casually to a Voidborn. "I have brought others to meet you," Zixthera said, gesturing toward the observation window. Marcus looked at the assembled aliens with interest rather than fear.
"Wonderful."
"I've been hoping to meet representatives from other species. Are they here for diplomatic reasons, or are they just curious about humans?" "Both," Zixthera admitted. "You are the first human any of us have encountered." "Well, I'm honored to make first contact. Though I should warn you, I'm probably not the best example of human diplomacy. I'm a cargo ship captain, not an ambassador." Marcus stood and waved at the observation window. "Hello, it's nice to meet you all." The effect was immediate and dramatic. The crystalline hegemony representatives dimmed their lights and backed away from the window. One of the Aquatic Federation delegates actually fainted, sinking to the bottom of their tank. The Hive Collective scouts began making alarm pheromones that triggered the station's air filtration systems, but Marcus didn't seem to notice their reactions. He was studying each species with obvious fascination. "That's incredible," he said to Zixthera. "I count at least 5 completely different evolutionary paths represented here. Silicon-based life, aquatic adaptation, collective consciousness, energy-based existence. This is like meeting living textbooks on xenobiology. You want to study them?" Zixthera asked. "Of course. Each species must have developed unique solutions to the challenges of survival and civilization. Think of what we could learn from each other." Marcus pressed closer to the window, his enthusiasm evident. "Do the crystal beings photosynthesize? How do the energy creatures maintain cohesion without physical form? Is the hive mind truly collective, or do individuals maintain some autonomy?" His excited questions carried through the intercom system to the observation room. Zixthera watched as the alien representatives exchanged uncertain glances. They had come expecting to interrogate a potentially dangerous new species. Instead, they found themselves being examined by an eager student. "Perhaps we should conduct formal interviews," Zixthera suggested, though she was beginning to suspect how this would play out. The first to enter the cell was Ambassador Christex of the Hegemony. The crystalline being's internal light flickered nervously as they approached the human. Christex stood nearly 7 feet tall, their body a complex lattice of living silicon that sparkled with rainbow hues. Marcus's face lit up with delight. "You're beautiful," he said simply. "Is your entire species photosynthetic? The way light moves through your structure is absolutely fascinating." Christex's glow intensified, a sign of surprise among their people. No one had ever called a crystalline being beautiful before. They were typically viewed as cold and alien, more like living machines than organic creatures. We do process solar radiation for energy," Christex admitted. "But we also consume mineral compounds. Our biology is hybrid organic-inorganic. Incredible! How do you reproduce? Do you grow new crystal matrices, or is there a more traditional biological component?" Marcus leaned forward eagerly. "And your communication through light frequencies. Can you create complex musical harmonies? Is there art in your culture based on light patterns?" For the next 20 minutes, Christex found themselves explaining crystalline culture to an absolutely fascinated human. Marcus asked insightful questions, made encouraging comments, and showed genuine appreciation for their achievements. By the time the interview ended, Christex was glowing more brightly than they had in years. "He's very interested," Christex reported to the others. "Not afraid at all. He wants to learn about us." The Aquatic Federation delegate entered next. Commander Depthsinger moved awkwardly in their mechanical walking suit, clearly uncomfortable outside their natural environment. Their tentacles writhed nervously as they approached the human. Marcus immediately noticed their discomfort. "That walking suit looks heavy. Are you okay? Would it be easier if we flooded the room partially? I can hold my breath for a few minutes if that would help." Depthsinger's tentacles stilled in shock. No air-breathing species had ever offered to accommodate aquatic comfort before. You would do that?" "Sure, first contact should be comfortable for everyone involved." Marcus smiled. "Plus, I've always wondered what it would be like to communicate underwater. Do you use sound, chemical signals, or both?" The interview proceeded with Marcus showing genuine concern for Depthsinger's comfort and endless curiosity about aquatic civilization. He asked about underwater cities, deep ocean exploration, and the challenges of developing technology in a liquid environment. "Your people must have incredible engineering skills," Marcus said admiringly, "building in 3 dimensions, dealing with pressure changes, creating materials that work underwater. That's amazingly complex." By the end of their conversation, Depthsinger was volunteering information about aquatic culture that they had never shared with outsiders before. The pattern continued with each subsequent interview. The Hive Collective Scout, initially terrified to be alone with any individual consciousness, found Marcus treating their collective nature as a fascinating social development, rather than something alien and disturbing. "You must have incredible coordination," Marcus marveled. "How do you make decisions that affect millions of individuals? Do you ever have internal disagreements?" And the efficiency of your construction projects. I've heard you can build entire cities in a matter of days. Even the energy being virtually impossible to communicate with under normal circumstances, found Marcus approaching their existence with scientific curiosity rather than fear or confusion. You exist as pure consciousness, Marcus said in wonder. That's the dream of philosophers throughout human history. What's it like to exist without physical limitations? Can you perceive things that corporeal beings can't? One by one, the galaxy's various species found themselves explaining their cultures, their achievements, and their perspectives to an enthusiastic human who treated each revelation as a gift. Marcus never showed fear, disgust, or judgment. He approached every strange behavior or alien custom with the assumption that it made perfect sense within its proper context. Watching from the sidelines, Zixthera felt her growing horror crystallize into certainty. Marcus wasn't interrogating these species. He was seducing them. With nothing but curiosity and genuine appreciation, he was making each species feel valued, understood, and important. Within hours, beings who had feared each other for millennia were chatting comfortably in Marcus's presence. The crystalline and aquatic representatives, who normally couldn't stand to be in the same room, were comparing notes on their conversations with the human. The Hive Scout was actually asking individual questions, something they never did outside their collective. Marcus hadn't just failed to be intimidated by the galaxy's various species. He had made them all feel special, and worst of all, Zixthera realized she was jealous. She had been the first to meet Marcus, but now she had to share his attention with everyone else. She found herself looking forward to their private conversations, to those moments when his curious brown eyes focused entirely on her. She was becoming domesticated, and she wasn't the only one. The human was winning over the entire galaxy, one smile at a time. 3 days later, the Galactic Council reached their decision. Marcus Chen would be released and allowed to return to Earth with a formal invitation for diplomatic contact. The vote had been unanimous, though Zixthera suspected the real reason had little to do with politics and everything to do with the fact that every representative had become personally fond of the human. She stood outside his cell for the last time, holding the release documents and trying to understand the strange emotion swirling in her chest. As a Voidborn, she had never experienced attachment to another being. Her species was largely solitary, coming together only for reproduction and military campaigns. The idea of missing someone was foreign to her, yet here she was, reluctant to say goodbye to a small human who had somehow become important to her in just a few short days. Marcus was packing his few belongings when she entered. He looked up with that same warm smile that had disarmed an entire station full of hardened diplomats and warriors. "Commander, I was hoping to see you before I left. I wanted to thank you for your kindness during my stay here." "Kindness?" Zixthera was puzzled. "I interrogated you. I held you prisoner." "You treated me with respect," Marcus replied simply. "You listened to what I had to say. You showed me pictures of your homeworld when I asked. You even had the station kitchen prepare food that wouldn't poison my biochemistry. That's kindness." Zixthera had done those things, though she hadn't thought of them as kindness at the time. She had told herself she was just maintaining an effective interrogation environment, but Marcus was right. Somewhere along the way, his well-being had become genuinely important to her. "Your ship has been repaired and refueled," she said, handing him the release documents. "You are free to go." "Thank you." Marcus took the papers, then looked at her seriously. "May I ask you a personal question, Commander?" She nodded, though part of her feared what he might say. "Are you happy? In your life, I mean. Do you enjoy what you do?" The question caught her completely off guard. No one had ever asked a Voidborn about happiness before. Her species was respected, feared, and avoided, but never asked about their emotional state. I serve the Empire," she said uncertainly. "I fulfill my duties." "That's not the same thing," Marcus said gently. "Do you have friends, family? Things you do just because they bring you joy?" Zixthera realized she didn't know how to answer. Voidborn didn't have friends. They had allies, subordinates, and superiors. Joy was not a concept that translated well into her language. "I see," Marcus said, reading her confusion. "That sounds lonely." "Voidborn do not experience loneliness," she said automatically. "Maybe not traditionally. But you're not a traditional Voidborn, are you? You asked me thoughtful questions. You showed genuine curiosity about human culture. You've been thinking about things beyond just duty and service. Marcus stepped closer, and for the first time in her life, Zixthera didn't feel the urge to display threatening behavior. I think you might be evolving beyond what your species has always been. The words hit her like a revelation. He was right. Over the past few days, she had found herself thinking about art, culture, philosophy, concepts that had never interested her before. She had wondered what it would be like to visit Earth, to see these creatures that humans lived alongside. She had imagined having conversations with Marcus about topics that had nothing to do with military strategy or imperial politics. She was changing, and it scared her more than any battlefield ever had. "What will you tell your people about us?" she asked, trying to regain some professional distance. "The truth, that you're a fascinating species with incredible achievements, that you've built a civilization that spans star systems, that your individuals are capable of growth, curiosity, and friendship." Marcus smiled. "I think humans and Voidborn could learn a lot from each other. You want to be allies with us?" "I want to be friends with you," Marcus said, and the distinction sent another chill through her spine. "Not political allies or trading partners, though those might come later. I mean actual friendship. Getting to know each other as individuals, sharing experiences, maybe even laughing together. Voidborn do not laugh. Maybe they just haven't found the right jokes yet." Despite everything, Zixthera felt her mandibles twitch in what might have been the beginning of amusement. The expression felt strange on her face, but not unpleasant. "Before I go," Marcus said, reaching into his bag, "I wanted to give you something." He pulled out a small device, his personal datapad. "I've loaded this with information about Earth. Pictures, music, literature, scientific papers. I thought you might enjoy exploring human culture at your own pace." Zixthera took the device with trembling hands. "This is a gift?" "Friendship gift," Marcus confirmed. "The first of many, I hope. When formal diplomatic contact is established, I'd like to request you as our liaison, if you're interested, of course. You want to work with me specifically? I want to continue our friendship specifically. The work part would just be a happy coincidence." Marcus extended his hand toward her. "This is how humans say goodbye to friends. You clasp hands briefly. It's meant to show trust and affection." Zixthera stared at the offered hand. It was so small compared to her clawed appendages. She could crush it without effort. But Marcus showed no fear, no hesitation. He trusted her completely. Carefully, gently, she reached out and enclosed his hand with one of her own. The contact was warm, soft, utterly alien to her usual experience, and somehow it was the most meaningful moment of her entire life. "Goodbye, friend Marcus," she said, testing out the unfamiliar word. "Goodbye, friend Zixthera. I'll see you soon." As Marcus walked away, Zixthera realized what had happened to her. What had happened to all of them. The crystalline delegates were already requesting cultural exchange programs with Earth. The Aquatic Federation wanted to establish joint ocean exploration projects. The Hive Collective was fascinated by human individuality and wanted to study it further. Every species that had met Marcus was now interested in humans, not as threats to be contained or resources to be exploited, but as friends to be cultivated. In just a few days, one human had fundamentally altered the political landscape of the galaxy. Not through force or cunning, but through simple, genuine friendship. Zixthera looked down at the datapad in her hands and finally understood what made humans truly terrifying. They didn't conquer species. They collected them. Like the pets Marcus had shown her, like the domesticated animals in his files. Humans would slowly and gently gather every species in the galaxy into their vast, loving family. And the most horrifying part was that everyone would go willingly, because being part of humanity's family was better than being alone in the cold, dangerous universe. As she watched Marcus's ship disappear into hyperspace, Zixthera made a decision that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. She was going to recommend that the Voidborn Empire accept Earth's eventual diplomatic overtures. She was going to suggest cultural exchange programs. She was going to become humanity's greatest advocate within the galactic community, not because she had been conquered or coerced, but because she had been befriended. And now, more than anything else, she wanted to be worthy of that friendship. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had arrived, armed with nothing but curiosity and kindness, and they were going to win everything without firing a single shot. Zixthera found herself looking forward to it. Thank you for watching and comment for next part.